The final round of the tournament was scheduled for 10 days after Yuna's victory over Sothrak. And those 10 days changed everything. Students who had ignored her now stepped aside when she walked through the corridors. Instructors who had dismissed her began watching her training sessions with new interest. And in the medical bay, where she spent most of the first 3 days, a steady stream of visitors came to see the human who had done the impossible. Sothrak was one of them. He appeared in the doorway of her recovery room on the second day, his injured leg still supported by a medical brace. His expression unreadable. Yuna watched him approach without speaking for a long moment. Neither of them said anything. "I have been thinking about our match," Sothrak finally said. "As have I. I do not understand how you won." Yuna shifted slightly in her bed, wincing as her cracked ribs protested the movement. "I did not win," she said. "You lost." Sothrak's eyes narrowed. And then he made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You are correct," he said. "I defeated myself by fighting a battle you were never trying to win. I was trying to survive," Yuna said. "Survival was the only victory I needed." Sothrak was quiet for a moment, processing this idea that ran counter to everything his culture had taught him about combat. "The Kethvari believe that the strong triumph over the weak," he said. "We have believed this for 10,000 generations. Humans believe that the adaptable triumph over the inflexible." Yuna replied, "We have believed this for perhaps 300,000 generations." Sothrak blinked. He had not known that humans had existed for so long. "I came to tell you something," he said. "In the final round, you will face Mortek." Yuna knew the name Mortek was the Gorvan champion, undefeated in 6 cycles at the academy. A being whose body was essentially living stone and whose strength was legendary, even among his own species. "I am aware," she said. "He's not cruel like I was," Sothrak said. "He will not toy with you or try to humiliate you. But he will not hold back either." "I understand." Sothrak hesitated, then spoke again. "Gorvan have a weakness," he said. "Their center of balance is higher than it appears, and their peripheral vision is limited by the structure of their skulls." Yuna looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" Sothrak did not answer directly. "I watched the recording of our match," he said. "I watched myself fail again and again to put you down. And I watched you rise again and again after every blow." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I do not apologize for what I said about your species," he continued, "but I was wrong. And I would rather you knew what you were facing than watch you fail because of ignorance." He turned and walked away before Yuna could respond. 10 days later, Yuna stood in the arena again. The crowd was even larger this time, word of her previous victory having spread beyond the academy to the wider station community. Beings who had never shown interest in student tournaments had come to see the human who refused to die. Mortek waited for her in the center of the arena. He was massive, even by Gorvan standards, a mountain of silicon and mineral that moved with surprising grace despite his bulk. His eyes glowed with the amber light common to his species, and they tracked Yuna's approach with calm assessment. "I have heard much about you," he said, his voice like stones grinding together. "And I have heard much about you." Yuna replied, "I will not underestimate you as Sothrak did. I would not expect you to." The signal to begin sounded, and Mortek advanced. He did not rush like Sothrak had rushed. He moved forward with patient inevitability, closing the distance between them step by step, giving Yuna nowhere to retreat. She tried the tactics that had worked before, circling around him, staying in motion, refusing to engage directly. But Mortek had watched the recordings too. He cut off her angles of escape, herding her toward the arena walls, reducing her options with each passing second. When she could retreat no further, he attacked. His fist came toward her like a meteor, and Yuna threw herself to the side, She avoided the direct impact, but the shock wave of displaced air knocked her off her feet. She rolled and came up running. But Mortek was already there, blocking her path. He struck again. And this time, the blow connected. Yuna flew across the arena and hit the floor hard enough to drive the breath from her lungs. Pain exploded through her body, and for a moment she could not remember how to move. But then she heard the sound of the crowd, the murmur of beings expecting her to stay down. And something deep inside her refused to give them what they expected. She rose. Mortek watched her without expression. "You are injured," he said. "Yes, you should yield." "No." He struck her again. And she went down again. She rose again. He struck her a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. Each blow should have been the end. Each blow was met with the impossible sight of a human woman dragging herself back to her feet after the fifth time. Mortek hesitated. He had never faced an opponent who simply would not stop. His species processed combat as an equation of force and resistance. And this human was breaking the equation by refusing to acknowledge that she had been defeated. Yuna saw the hesitation. She had nothing left for defense. Nothing left for clever tactics or patient strategy. She had only what she had always had: the refusal to accept any outcome other than the one she chose. She drove forward. Mortek was not prepared for aggression from an opponent who should have been broken. Yuna's fists struck the same point on his lower torso again and again, each blow insignificant on its own, each blow adding to the accumulated damage of the ones before. It was the way humans had hunted on Earth, not through single devastating attacks, but through persistent pressure that wore down prey over hours and days. Mortek tried to step back, tried to create distance, but Yuna stayed with him, refusing to give him space to reset. His foot came down hard as he tried to regain his balance. The reinforced training floor, built to withstand the violence of 10,000 warriors, cracked beneath the combined stress. Mortek stumbled for a being whose balance was already compromised. The uneven surface was enough. He fell. The impact shook the arena, and the crowd fell silent. Yuna stood over the fallen Gorvan champion, her body broken in a dozen places, her face covered in blood that was entirely her own. She was swaying, barely conscious, held upright by nothing but will, but she was upright. The announcer declared her the victor, and the crowd erupted. Later, when the medical staff had finished their work and Yuna was resting in a recovery pod, Tessic came to visit. "The instructors are saying you achieved victory through persistent systemic pressure," she said. "They are adding it to the academy curriculum." "Good," Yuna said. "How did you know you could win?" Yuna was quiet for a moment. "I did not know," she said. "I simply refused to accept the alternative." Tessic looked at the cracked floor, visible through the medical bay window. The damage that no one had yet repaired. Sothrak and several other students have requested to train alongside humans, she said. "They want to understand your methods," Yuna smiled. And despite the pain it caused her injured face, the smile was genuine. "Then perhaps they are beginning to measure the right things." The Academy's official report on the tournament was distributed across the galactic networks within days. Military commanders and combat instructors throughout 12 star systems read about a human woman who had defeated opponents many times. Her size and strength through nothing more than the vire refusal to yield, the report noted in clinical language. That Earth had not sent its strongest warrior to the Academy. It had sent someone average, and she had broken the floor in the years that followed. More humans came to the Academy, and more humans proved that the first had not been an anomaly. The galaxy learned, slowly and painfully, that there were different kinds of strength, and one of those kinds could only be found on a small blue world that had spent billions of years trying to kill everything that lived. There, the things that survived had learned something important. They had learned that endurance was not The same as weakness, and sometimes the being who refuses to fall is more dangerous than the one who never gets hit at all. Sothrak rose from his knee with difficulty, and the arena watched in collective disbelief. His injured leg was clearly weakened, and he could no longer move with the explosive speed that had made him one of the most feared students at the academy. But he was still a HFY warrior, still 3 meters of armored muscle and claws. And Yuna was still a human who had already absorbed more punishment than should have been survivable. The match was not over. Sothrak shifted to a defensive stance, something no one in the arena had ever seen him do before. He was protecting his injured leg, limiting his mobility. Fighting from a position of weakness against an opponent everyone had expected him to destroy. Yuna did not press her advantage. She continued her patient circling, watching for openings, conserving what remained of her strength. Her body was a landscape of pain, and she could feel the grinding sensation in her ribs that suggested at least one of them was cracked. But she had learned long ago that pain was just information. She did not have to obey it in the faculty observation section. Senior instructor Vorath was explaining what they were witnessing to a group of junior instructors who could not understand how this match was still continuing. "Watch her breathing," he said, pointing at the arena floor. "She has not lost control of her respiratory rates since the match began." "How is that possible?" one of the junior instructors asked. "She has taken impacts that would incapacitate a Mirathi. Humans process pain differently than other species," Vorath said. "Their nervous systems evolved on a world where injury was constant and unavoidable. So they developed the ability to acknowledge pain without surrendering to it. That seems inefficient." "No," Vorath said quietly. "It seems terrifying." On the arena floor, Sothrak made his move. He launched a desperate combination of strikes, committing everything he had to a final overwhelming assault. His claws tore through the air where Yuna had been standing, but she had already moved, dropping low and letting the attacks pass over her head. One strike caught her across the ribs, and she felt something give way inside her chest. The pain was immediate and enormous. But Yuna did not fall. She staggered backward, her vision flickering at the edges, and for a moment she thought her body might finally betray her. But then she straightened. She took a breath that sent fire through her damaged ribs, and she returned to her fighting stance. The crowd made a sound that was not quite a gasp and not quite a cheer. It was something closer to fear. Sothrak stared at the human who should have been broken, who should have been begging for mercy, who should have been anything other than what she was. "What are you?" he demanded. Yuna did not waste breath on an answer. She waited. Sothrak's final assault had cost him dearly, and his body was beginning to fail in ways he could not hide. His movements had become sluggish, his breathing ragged, his scales losing their healthy sheen as exhaustion drained the strength from his muscles. He had been designed for violence that lasted seconds, perhaps minutes at most. This match had continued for nearly half an hour. He tried to attack again, but his leg buckled before he could complete the movement, and he stumbled forward. Yuna stepped aside and let him fall. Sothrak hit the arena floor and did not rise. The medical staff rushed onto the field, surrounding the fallen HFY warrior, and the announcer's voice declared what everyone had already realized. The match was over. The human had won. Yuna stood alone in the center of the arena, swaying slightly, her face a mask of blood and bruises. She had not delivered the final blow. She had not needed to. She had simply refused to stop until her opponent could not continue in the medical bay an hour later. The doctor examining Yuna made a discovery that would become part of Academy legend. "You fought the last 4 minutes of that match with 2 cracked ribs," the doctor said. A Mirathi physician whose 4 hands moved with practiced efficiency over Yuna's injuries. "Yes," Yuna said. "Did you not feel them break?" "I felt it." "Then why did you not yield?" Yuna considered the question as if it was asked in a language she did not fully understand. Because yielding was not an option I was willing to accept. The doctor stared at her for a long moment, then returned to treating her injuries without further comment in the corridors and training halls of the academy. Word of the match spread like fire through dry grass. Students who had not attended were shown recordings, and those recordings were watched again and again. The analysis varied, but certain facts were undeniable. A human had defeated a HFY warrior, not through superior strength or speed, or any of the qualities that the Academy valued, through something else entirely that evening. A group of students gathered in one of the common areas and began searching the galactic information networks for data about Earth. What they found disturbed them. Earth was a world of extreme conditions. A planet where the temperature could vary by 100 degrees between regions, where the very ground could shake and split without warning, where predators hunted in every environment from frozen wastelands to boiling jungles. The creatures that lived there had evolved in constant competition with death itself and humans. The beings that everyone had dismissed as weak and fragile had conquered that world. They had spread across its surface. From the highest mountains to the deepest oceans, they had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have exterminated them. And they had done it not through physical superiority, but through the simple, stubborn refusal to die. A Mirthi student named Keleth, the one Yuna had helped with her injured arms, spoke quietly into the silence of the common room. Their world tried to kill them every day, she said. And they refused. No one laughed. No one had anything to say at all. The tournament arena was the largest enclosed space Yuna had ever seen. A dome of reinforced metal and energy shields that could contain the violence of 1,000 warriors. Fighting at once, today it would host a single match. And half the academy had come to watch. Word had spread about the human who had accepted Sothrak's challenge, and curiosity had drawn spectators from every corner of the station. Some came hoping to see something remarkable. Most came expecting to witness a quick and brutal end to an experiment that should never have been attempted. Yuna stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena floor, wrapping her hands with strips of cloth that would offer minimal protection against the forces she was about to face. Tessic had come to help her prepare, though the young Mirthi could not hide her fear. "You do not have to do this," Tessic said for the 10th time. "You could forfeit the match and remain at the academy in a lower cohort." "I could," Yuna agreed. "Then why do you not?" Yuna finished wrapping her left hand and began working on her right. "Because forfeiting would prove them correct," she said. "They believe humans do not belong here, and if I run away from this fight, I will confirm everything they think they know about my species. But you might die." "Yes." Tessic made a sound of frustration that her species produced when words failed them. "You humans are insane," she said. Yuna smiled, and for a moment, the fear in her eyes was replaced by something older and darker. "Perhaps," she said, "but our insanity has kept us alive for a very long time." The arena floor rose on a platform, carrying Yuna into the light. The crowd was enormous. Thousands of alien faces arranged in tiers that stretched up toward the distant ceiling, and the noise of their voices washed over her like a wave across the arena. Sothrak was already waiting. He looked even larger than she remembered, his scales gleaming with oil that his species applied before combat. His claws extended to their full length. He was smiling. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, explaining the rules of the match. Combat would continue until one fighter yielded or was rendered unable to continue, and medical staff would intervene. Only if death appeared imminent. Yuna noted that the phrase, "appeared imminent," left considerable room for interpretation. The signal to begin was a flash of light and a tone that vibrated through the floor. Sothrak charged. Immediately, he crossed the distance between them in 3 massive strides, his claws sweeping toward Yuna in an arc that would have torn her in half if it connected. But Yuna was not there. She had started moving the instant the signal sounded. Not toward her opponent, but to the side, and Sothrak's claws cut through empty air. He spun to face her. And she was already moving again, circling around him, refusing to stay in one place. "Stand and fight," Sothrak growled. Yuna did not answer. He attacked again. Faster this time, and again she slipped away from the blow, taking a glancing hit across her shoulder that spun her around, but did not stop her movement. The crowd began to murmur. This was not how combat was supposed to look. A proper warrior stood there, ground and met force with force. And this human was doing neither. She was simply refusing to be where Sothrak wanted her to be. The minutes stretched on, and Sothrak's attacks grew more frequent and more desperate. Each time he committed to a strike, Yuna was somewhere else, and each time he had to reset and try again. His body burned through energy reserves that were not designed for extended combat. The Kathvari were ambush predators in their evolutionary history, built for explosive violence followed by rest. And Sothrak had never faced an opponent who simply refused to engage on his terms. Yuna took hits. She could not avoid all of them, and the ones that connected sent her tumbling across the arena floor. Blood began to appear, red against the gray metal, and the crowd held its breath each time she went down. But each time, she rose. She rose slowly sometimes, and she rose quickly other times. But she always rose, and each time she returned to her feet. Sothrak looked slightly less confident. 15 minutes into the match, the Kathvari warrior was breathing hard. His movements had lost their explosive speed, and his attacks were becoming predictable. Yuna's body was screaming with pain from a dozen impacts, but her breathing remained controlled, steady, patient. She had trained for this, not for victory necessarily, but for exactly this moment when an opponent designed for quick kills began to realize that quick kills were not available. Sothrak lunged at her with a combination of strikes that would have been devastating 5 minutes earlier. Now his movements were just slow enough for Yuna to see the pattern, just tired enough for her to find the gap. She slipped beneath his extended arm and drove her fist into the nerve cluster behind his knee, exactly where the Academy archives had indicated a vulnerability existed. Sothrak's leg buckled. The arena fell absolutely silent. A Kathvari warrior, one of the most feared combat species in the galaxy, was on one knee before a human. Yuna stepped back, her chest heaving with exertion, blood running down her face from a cut above her eye. She could have pressed the attack, but she was not certain she had the strength remaining to finish him. Instead, she waited. Sothrak looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw something that no Kathvari had ever shown to a human before: uncertainty. He did not know how this had happened. He did not know how to make it unhappen, and for the first time in his life, he was not certain he would win. The crowd remained silent, thousands of beings holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Yuna raised her fists and returned to her fighting stance. "I am still here," she said. Her voice was quiet, but in the silence of the arena, everyone heard her. Sothrak pushed himself to his feet, his injured leg shaking beneath him, and the match continued. But something had changed in the arena, something fundamental. The beings in the crowd had come expecting to watch a predator dispatch its prey. They were beginning to suspect they had misidentified which was which. 3 weeks passed at the Galactic Combat Academy, and Unipar continued to rank at the bottom of every power assessment the instructors could devise. She could not lift what the others lifted. She could not strike as hard as the others struck. She could not move as fast as the Marathi, or absorb punishment like the Gorvan, or intimidate anyone with her physical presence. But something strange began happening during the endurance trials. The Academy's training programs included exercises designed to test how long students could maintain peak performance. And these exercises revealed a truth about humans that the instructors had not anticipated on the third day of continuous movement drills. The HFY students began dropping out one by one, their powerful muscles cramping and failing as they overheated. On the fifth day, the Marathi students collapsed, their rapid metabolisms burning through energy reserves faster than they could replenish. On the seventh day, even the Garan students requested rest cycles, their silicone bodies requiring time to process accumulated stress. Yuna kept moving. She was not fast, and she was not graceful, but she simply refused to stop. By the ninth day, she was the only student still completing the exercise circuit, and the instructors had to end the trial because they had not designed it to last that long. Senior Instructor Varath, a scarred Gorvan veteran who had fought in 3 interstellar conflicts, made a note in his records that he would review later during a tactical simulation the following week. Yuna's team was assigned to defend a position against overwhelming forces. The exercise was designed to teach students how to handle defeat, and Yuna's team lost badly within the first 20 minutes. But the instructors noticed something unusual in the replay data. Yuna had been the last member of her team eliminated, surviving for an additional 37 minutes after her teammates had fallen. More importantly, she had changed her strategy 3 times during that period, adapting to each new threat as it emerged. Learning from each failure and adjusting her approach. Humans are supposed to be rigid thinkers, one instructor said to Varath after reviewing the data. Perhaps we were misinformed. Varath replied word of Yuna's performance did not spread widely, but a few students began watching her more carefully. Tessik was one of them. The young Marathi had expected her human roommate to quit after the first week, but Yuna showed no signs of giving up, and this persistence was confusing. One evening, Tessik returned to their quarters and found Yuna helping a struggling Marathi student named Keleth with recovery exercises. Keleth had strained 2 of her arms during a training accident, and the Academy's medical staff had treated the injury but offered no guidance on rehabilitation. Yuna was showing her stretches and movements that would help restore flexibility and strength. Where did you learn this? Tessik asked. On Earth, Yuna said. Humans damage ourselves constantly, so we have developed detailed knowledge of how bodies heal. And while your anatomy is different from mine, the principles are similar. Keleth flexed her injured arms experimentally and found that the exercises reduced her pain. Thank you, she said to Yuna, and there was genuine surprise in her voice, as if she had not expected kindness from the small human everyone mocked after Keleth left. Tessik sat down across from Yuna and studied her with new eyes. Why do you stay here? She asked. Everyone expects you to fail, and the others make your life difficult at every opportunity. Because I want to prove something, Yuna said. What do you want to prove? Yuna was quiet for a long moment before answering. That strength is not the only thing that matters. Sothrak had not forgotten about the human who refused to quit. He made her life difficult in small ways, bumping into her in corridors, making comments about her size and weakness within her hearing, ensuring that she was never allowed to forget her place in the Academy hierarchy during a sparring rotation. He was assigned to face her in a training match. The rules of such matches were simple. Fight until one opponent yielded or was unable to continue. There were supposed to be restrictions against excessive force, but those restrictions were loosely enforced, and everyone knew it. Sothrak struck Yuna with a blow that sent her tumbling across the training floor. She rolled with the impact, came to her feet, and returned to her fighting stance. He struck her again, harder this time, and she went down again. She got back up. The instructors watched without intervening, and the other students watched with a mixture of discomfort and fascination. Sothrek hit Yuna 6 times, each blow powerful enough to break bones in a human body. And 6 times she rose from the floor and returned to stance. She did not cry out. She did not yield. She did not speak at all. When the time limit for the match expired, Yuna was still standing, and Sothrek was breathing hard from the exertion of trying to put her down permanently. He looked at her with something in his eyes that was not quite anger and not quite fear, but something in between. Why you not stay down? He demanded. Yuna wiped blood from her lip and said nothing. That evening, she requested access to the Academy archives and spent hours studying combat records of every species represented in the student body. She asked Tessic questions about Kethvari joint structure, and Tessic answered as best she could. She researched Marathi reaction patterns and Gorvan balance points and the specific weaknesses that each species tried to hide. You are planning something, Tessic said. I am learning. Yuna replied. The announcement came at the end of the week. The midterm ranking tournament would begin in 10 days, and all students were required to compete. The tournament would determine standings for the remainder of the training cycle, and poor performance could result in dismissal. From the academy, Sothrek approached Yuna in the dining hall. After the announcement, I volunteered to face the Terran in the first round, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I will show the academy what happens when prey forgets its place. The hall fell silent as everyone turned to watch. Yuna set down her eating utensils and looked up at Sothrek. I accept, she said. Sothrek smiled, showing rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh. Try not to die too quickly, he said. I want the others to see what human endurance really means. He walked away, and the noise in the dining hall slowly resumed. Tessic leaned close to Yuna. He has killed sparring partners before, she whispered. The academy permits serious injury in tournament matches, and he will not hold back against you. Yuna nodded slowly. I understand, she said. Are you not afraid? Yuna considered the question carefully before answering. Yes, she said. But fear has never stopped me from doing what needs to be done. She returned to her meal, and if her hands trembled slightly, she did not let anyone see. The shuttle descended through the clouds of Vareth Prime, and Yuna Park pressed her face against the viewport like a child seeing snow for the first time. She had traveled for 3 months to reach this place, crossing distances that her grandmother could never have imagined. And now the Galactic Combat Academy spread beneath her like a metal flower blooming on an alien world. The station was massive beyond reason, a structure that housed 10,000 students from 12 different star systems, and somewhere in that maze of corridors and training halls, Yuna would either prove herself or fail completely. She was not certain which outcome awaited her. The docking procedure took longer than expected because the station had not been designed for human vessels. And when Yuna finally stepped onto the arrival platform, she understood why. Everyone around her was enormous. A group of Kethvari warriors stood near the registration desk, their reptilian bodies towering at 3 meters tall, their scales gleaming like polished armor under the artificial lights beyond them. A cluster of Marathi students moved with liquid grace, their forearms folding and unfolding in patterns that seemed almost like dance, their predator eyes tracking every movement in the crowded space. Yuna was 162 centimeters tall, and she weighed 58 kilograms, and standing among these giants made her feel like a mouse that had wandered into a convention of cats. But she had not traveled 3 months to turn around. Now, she walked to the registration desk with her shoulders straight and her head high. And if her heart was beating too fast, nobody needed to know that, but her. The administrator was a Garvan, a silicon-based being with a body like compressed stone and eyes that glowed with soft amber light. He looked down at Yuna for a long moment before checking his records. Terran, he said, and the word carried neither warmth nor hostility, only a kind of distant curiosity. You are the first of your kind to enter the advanced combat program. I am aware, Yuna said. Your species has no natural weapons, the administrator continued. No claws, no venom, no armored hide, no exceptional speed or strength by galactic standards. I am aware of that as well. The administrator made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough, and he handed her a data tablet containing her room assignment and schedule, training cohort 7. He said, barracks in the eastern wing. Yuna thanked him and walked away. And she did not need to ask why she had been assigned to cohort 7. She had done her research before leaving Earth, and she knew that cohort 7 was where the academy placed students they expected to fail. The barracks were sparse, but clean, with beds designed for species much larger than humans, and Yuna had to climb onto her sleeping platform like she was scaling a small cliff. Her roommate arrived an hour later, a young Mirathi named Tessic, whose forearms moved nervously as she introduced herself. I hope you do not mind sharing quarters with me, Tessic said, her voice carrying the musical tones common to her species. I know that humans prefer privacy, but the academy does not have single rooms for students. I do not mind, Yuna said. I grew up with 3 sisters in a small apartment, so I am used to sharing space. Tessic relaxed slightly, and her arms stopped their anxious dance. I must be honest with you, she said after a moment of silence. Many students here believe you should not have been accepted, and some of them are not kind about expressing this opinion. I expected as much. You are not offended? Yuna shook her head and smiled, a small smile that did not reach her eyes. I have been underestimated my entire life, she said. I am used to it by now. The orientation assembly took place in a vast hall that could have held a small stadium, and Yuna found herself standing among hundreds of alien students who all seemed designed for violence in ways that humans were not. The academy's commandant, an ancient Kethvari whose scales had faded to pale gray, delivered a speech about honor and excellence and the proud traditions of the institution. Then the instructors began listing the natural advantages of each species represented in the student body. The Kethvari had armored scales that could deflect blade strikes and claws that could tear through metal plating. The Mirathi had forearms capable of independent action and reflexes that operated faster than most species could perceive. The Gorvan had bodies dense enough to shrug off impacts that would kill any organic being, and strength that could crush stone when they reached humans in the alphabetical listing. There was a pause that stretched on for several uncomfortable seconds. Humans, the instructor finally said, possess no significant natural advantages in combat scenarios. A ripple of laughter spread through the assembly hall, and Yuna kept her expression perfectly neutral as dozens of alien eyes turned to look at her. They are classified as a persistence predator species, the instructor continued, meaning they evolved to outlast prey rather than overpower it, and their primary assets are adaptability and endurance. The laughter grew louder, and a Kethvari student near Yuna leaned down to speak directly into her ear. Endurance, he said, his breath hot against her skin. That means you are prey that learned to run for a long time before dying. His name was Sothrak, and Yuna would remember him. The first training session was designed to establish baseline capabilities, and Yuna watched as student after student demonstrated the gifts their evolution had granted them. A Kethvari lifted a weight that would have crushed a human flat. A Mirathi moved through an obstacle course so quickly that Yuna could barely track her movements. A Gorvan stood motionless while training drones fired impact rounds at his chest. And he did not even blink when Yuna's turn came. She walked to the center of the training floor and performed a series of strikes against a measurement dummy. The dummy recorded her force output and speed and displayed the results on a screen. Above the hall, her scores were the lowest of any student present. Sothrak did not even bother to laugh this time. He simply looked at her with something like pity. Which was worse, after the session ended, he approached her in the corridor outside the training hall. "You should withdraw," he said, "before you embarrass yourself further, or before someone accidentally kills you during a sparring exercise." Yuna looked up at him. This massive creature who could break her body without effort. And she did not feel fear. She felt something else entirely. Something cold and patient that had lived in human hearts since the first of her ancestors had faced down predators on the African plains. She bowed slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement that was not surrender, and she walked away without saying a word that night, after Tessic had fallen asleep. Yuna rose from her bed and began training. She moved through forms she had practiced as childhood, strikes, and blocks and movements that her teachers on Earth had drilled into her bones. Her muscles burned and her breath came hard. But she did not stop. She trained until the artificial dawn cycle began to brighten the barracks windows. And then she washed her face and prepared for another day of being mocked. They measure the wrong things, she whispered to her reflection in the mirror. Her reflection did not argue.